guys, good evening, happy holidays. So tonight we're going to use watercolor markers to paint a festive Christmas poinsettia. So if you have any questions about watercolor markers, let me know in the chat. We've got a whole lot of painting ahead of us, and I forgot my watercolor water cup in the bathroom, so I have to be right back. But let's go ahead and dive in. So unfortunately, I'll be right back with my cup of watercolor water. Also, we've got some festive Christmas music playing in the background. Let me know in the chat if it's too loud for you guys or what. Oh, it sounds like my wonderful husband's getting me a cup of watercolor water. Oh, really appreciate it. Anyway, if you would like to paint along and you would like to draw your own poinsettia, I have a tutorial on how to do just that. Thank you so much. How to do just that. It went live this week. Or you can print out the line art from the link in the description. If you're one of my fantabulous art nerds on Patreon, you get that line art for free. So check Patreon for your download link. And if you are not, you can purchase it for, I think it's $2 on Gumroad. And of course, all money that is raised by selling line arts ends up getting rolled right back into this channel by purchasing art supplies to review. So the materials I am using for today's tutorial are a Canon XL watercolor sketchbook. So these are fairly affordable, fairly accessible. You can get them everywhere from Walmart to Michael's to art supply stores. We also have Faber-Castell watercolor markers. These are India ink based watercolor markers, so they're going to be very, very light fast. If those are not enough, I also have my Winsor & Newton watercolor markers. They have since been rebranded as the Pro markers, but they should be the same thing. I haven't noticed any differences between the two from what I've seen, which is kind of a bummer because I was hoping Winsor & Newton would address some of the build quality problems these things have. We also have a ceramic plate, and no, it is not so that I can eat delicious, delicious Popeyes in front of you guys. It is for me to apply my watercolor marker and then use this as a palette. We have a cup of clean water with a paint puck inside to help with the scrubbings. We have a selection of watercolor brushes. Most of these are silver black velvet brushes, which are some of my favorite watercolor brushes. And of course, we have a paper towel. Hey Hema, good evening. So I'm gonna go ahead and just rearrange my workspace a smidgeroony. I don't have infinite desk space, so I gotta make it work. All right, fine, Winsor & Newton markers. You want to lay down? You want to take a nap? That's fine with me. Hey Tolly, hey Tanner, how are y'all this evening? I hope everybody's warm. It finally got to be a little bit cooler here in Louisiana. All right, so I want to start with some of the background leaves. And the way I'm doing these leaves is, you guys see they have not transparent, but like open line art veins. So these leaves are going to be dark green, but they're going to have a yellow vein down the center. So I'm going to start with said yellow vein. And if you guys need reference, because I'm definitely going to be working with reference, I have some poinsettia images pulled up on Google. All right, so I wet my watercolor brush in my clean water, and I've used that to pick up some of, how is it that I always, no matter how carefully I erase, I always find bits that I didn't erase. All right, let's try that again. So watercolor markers can be a lot of fun. They're a very compact, easy to travel. Portable, Becca, that's the word you're looking for, portable. They're a very portable way to carry watercolor. A lot of watercolor markers are not actually pigment or India ink, but dye. So those are gonna be quite a bit more water reactive. I am using pigment-based watercolor markers today. So they're gonna be not only less water reactive, so we'll be able to do more layering, but they're also going to be more light fast than dye-based watercolor markers. And I hope all of you are crossing your fingers for faster dry times today. Last week we did a watercolor workshop on painting the Northern Lights, and it was a fairly simple technique, but because it was so wet outside, it ended up taking 3 hours to dry. Now, Joseph ordered Popeyes to be delivered at what, 8 o'clock tonight? Oh, I had like an exterior incentive to not take forever. Is that my Christmas music in the background? The music I'm playing? All right, so we have our yellow applied. Now, let's twist my plate, and I'm gonna grab some blue, and I'm gonna paint the background. And this plate came from good old Dollar Tree, so you don't need to spend hardly any money at all on your plate. You could get one at Goodwill. Okay, in a second I will adjust the music so that it's not so loud. Apologize for that. I didn't change any of my foobar settings, but I did introduce Christmas music to the list, so kinda. Let's see. There we go. Hopefully that's better. So I know it's still early in December, but are you guys working on or doing any fun holiday or Christmas activities this year? I know COVID kind of makes some of the old standbys a little bit more difficult, but I think that makes inventing new traditions even more important. I've been working on some really cute Cara Paper Children designs for December. And I've already shared the line arts with my patrons, and I've already started recording the tutorials for them. I'm just waiting until I'm a little bit further along before I start sharing them live with the public. So all I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of filling in my background using phthalo blue. Oh, Gesundheit. So recently, I got myself a subscription to Viz's monthly online manga subscription. So it's only like $1.99 a month. So I've been reading a lot of manga lately. Let me pop out the chat so I can see what's going on. We've got a smidgeroony and cheese. And Hema says, I remember painting a flower sort of like this with watercolor in 9th grade, LOL. You probably had a better 9th grade year than I did then. I was kind of blocked out from taking art courses. Tally says, doing well, making my birthday list. Nice, happy birthday. Tanner says, we're surviving, resting happily tonight. That's good to hear. And Joseph says, I haven't done anything Xmas-y other than watch you set up a tree and bought presents. And Hema has a funky little Pokey Crimbas set up in their room. Oh, you should share pictures of that. I bet that's really cute. It is basically the Shonen Jump sub. I don't know that they have any other subscription. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to confuse. Let me disambiguate. Okay, so for these background darker leaves, I'm going to put down a wash of purple, and I could either use dioxine or I could use purple violet. It doesn't really matter. And then in the center, I want something a little bit warmer and brighter than this yellow. So I'm gonna, these are like batons, aren't they? I'm gonna grab this one and also this one. Now, something else fun about the ceramic plates is that with a little bit of clean water or dirty water, if that's all you got, you can very quickly and very easily wipe them down and have a fresh surface to work on. And in my tutorials, you guys usually see me using the plastic daisy palettes. It's mostly because they have those individual wells, and I'm very rough on everything I own. So plastic is bestest, I guess. All right, so purple for our background leaves. And don't worry, I am gonna work directly with the watercolor marker soon. I'm just kind of using this to lay down some initial colors. So I am painting tonight on a cellulose-based watercolor paper. These tend to have much quicker dry times than cotton rag watercolor paper. The downside is they tend to have much quicker dry times. So your ability, I'm gonna add some just clean water to the center there. Your ability to be able to make corrections or blend things out is much more limited. However, I think they play really nicely with watercolor markers because it's less likely, the surface is less likely to get all scrubbed up. And I have a video coming out about this, but so last week I went on this mission to get a Christmas tree. I had had this white Christmas tree from Target. I'd had it for a few years, but had been living in the attic because I've been coming back to Louisiana for Christmas, and I didn't want to just leave a Christmas tree out, you know, with Bowie. So the Christmas tree I had gone unused for like 5 or 6 years. And we moved and we brought it because I thought it would be in good shape. It's just been sitting in a, you know, a unclimate controlled attic forever. That's not detrimental to anything. Well, so Joseph got it out earlier this week, I think on Monday, and got it set up, and that tree went from white to like smoker brown. It looked terrible. So Tuesday evening, I dragged my mom out to go look at Christmas trees with me, and we ended up hitting 2 different Walmarts and a Michael's, and I couldn't really find what I wanted, but I ended up kind of settling on this rose gold tinsel tree. And the side of the box said that it came with a stand. The stand is such an important part of an artificial tree, wouldn't you guys agree? I mean, without the stand, you're just kind of propping a tree in the corner, and if you've got cats, that's an invitation for danger. So I unboxed the Christmas tree and I try to get it set up because I need the tree for my gift guide this year. It's a set piece. Gives it that nice holiday feeling, right? And plus this is the first year we could actually put up a tree because we're not going to be spending 2 weeks in Louisiana. Well, I guess you guys probably know where this story's going. I get that tree unboxed and there's no stand. No stand anywhere. I even like set up the tree thinking, oh, you know, maybe the company that made this hid the stand in the branches. I don't know. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. No stand. So we end up having to return our Christmas tree to Walmart, and I ended up ordering a tree off of Amazon. And the Amazon listing, it's a $60 tree, and the Amazon listing is just gorgeous, right? I get the tree and it is a $30 tree in terms of quality. At best, not a great tree. So that's my Christmas tree saga. All right, so I have applied this underpainting of purple to our poinsettia. I'm gonna re-wet the center because I want this like orangey glow. Twist the plate. Apply the color. And dabbity dab dab dab. And sometimes water control is a little bit more challenging on a cellulose paper like this. Then while that's still wet, I'll go in and try. It may be too wet to actually get. It's too wet to take any. So scrub it out onto my plate again. I gotta do something about that. That's too much water. Pow. Pow, pow, pow. Pow. Let's try it again. It's one of the nice things about watercolor is it's actually incredibly forgiving. Okay, so while that dries, I'm going to start working on our background leaves. Oh, well, okay, happy early birthday. And I'm just going in directly right now with my watercolor marker. And you can blend it out or leave it as is. You know, in years past, I've never really done a lot of Christmas tutorials, mostly because we were traveling and it was very difficult to do that. And that would mean working on Christmas tutorials in not Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving isn't a month, in November. And I have a rule about not starting Christmas until after Thanksgiving is over. Okay, so that is our yellow veins. Now, what do I want to do? Do I want to go right in with green? I think I do. What markers are those? I am using the older version of the Winsor Newton watercolor markers, as well as the Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer watercolor markers. So 2 types of markers and 2 types of pigment. And yeah, playing Christmas music. because I'm finally doing Christmas tutorials. So I am starting the leaf color with leaf green. Go in while it's still wet and just blend it out some. And speaking of Christmas music, I have the songs that are going to be playing during this stream listed out down in the description for the live stream. I also have a link where you can download this line art and color along if you want. So next, I'm going to introduce some dark phthalo green, if I can get it uncapped. Try to keep my hand out of the watercolor. It's kind of an important thing. And I'm going to do some color into color blending in a second. Got to get enough color down to actually justify it. I'm basically just going to do what I'm doing here for all the background trees while our main poinsettia leaves, the red leaves, are drying. Can also go in with a darker blue, like, what are you? This phthalo blue red shade or this indigo I have hidden all the way under there. Ooh, that one's been chewed up. How did it get so chewed up? I don't even know. And you want to be kind of light-handed about this because once the paper is as wet as this, it's going to start pilling. Which is one of the reasons I'm mostly using just the brush tips on these. Kind of helps prevent too much paper abrasion because the bullet nibs on most markers are a little bit more scratchy. this with the Sakura Pigment FB as well as the Pentel Pigment Brush Pen. So we shouldn't have any problems with our inks kind of reactivating or smearing all over the place. What are you guys asking Santa for this year? Joseph, what are you asking Santa for this year? Nothing. Nothing? A house? No, it's not coming until later. Nothing. I want a bigger desk. Popeyes. And Popeyes, but a bigger desk. I want a bigger desk and more of my Christmas / holiday YouTube content already finished. Oh, hopefully they got it for you then. That's a good time to get it. We were at the clock store the other day getting a present for Joseph's parents, and they were having a 30% off sale, so we ended up getting something for the house we don't even have yet. Oh, wrong side. Seriously, I think one of my students ruined this brush because I would not ever abuse something I paid good money for so badly. It's one of the pitfalls of teaching and using your materials is they tend to get ruined because often the students assume it's something someone else paid for, so we can ruin it. Even though I tell them they're mine, please don't be too rough. Yeah, I haven't gotten any Santa presents in a really long time, unless you count ugly cats, which, speaking of, I think Joseph asked all my patrons to vote on which ugly cat is going to be this year's ugly cat. So, if you haven't voted...
I have to close the poll because I ordered it yesterday.
Oh, you did? You picked? So they voted?
Some people voted.
That's nice. I'm glad some people voted. Sometimes it's hard to get people on Patreon to respond to things. That's why I quit doing the shout outs during the live streams, is no one ever responded. And I wasn't sure if it's because people weren't comfortable with having me promote their work, or if they just weren't seeing it, or they figured I would just do, like, pick someone randomly anyway. But because I didn't know what individual people's intentions were, I didn't want to make anyone super uncomfortable, so I just kind of quit doing it, which is a shame because I really liked, you know, being able to talk about other people's work and sing their praises and help maybe introduce new people to their stuff. You know what you could do is you could put a present for your parents under the tree and sign it from Santa. Because if it's been a while since you've gotten a Santa present, I bet it's been even longer since they've gotten one. That wouldn't be... I've given presents, quote unquote, from Santa before. Like to family members and stuff. And thank you so much for voting in the poll. I have no idea. I haven't looked at any of the ugly cats as part of the deal. I don't actually know who's up for voting. And Joseph actually asked my mom for help picking this year, which almost made me cry because there was a time when I thought they would never get along well enough that she would vote in the ugly cat voting arena. We gotta set that up, like a tournament style ugly cat shonen fighter. Oh, that's really nice. Well, this might be the first time they get something from Santa then. Santa. Alright, so since this leaf is towards the bottom, I need to add more dark green and more shadow going on here. It's too light and too bright. Did you have a light bright growing up, Joseph?
No.
My grandma had one at her house and I would play with it. But I want one now so I can do like fun messages on it for my streams and stuff. Once we have a house, I'm going to go like full tech mode. It's a little bit darker at least. We could do an ugly cat dating sim. That would be pretty funny. And yeah, it's just photos of the ugly cats. So really, if I'd been a smart Bequito today, I would have started on the right-hand side and then worked my way around since I'm right-handed instead of having to reach over. Okay, so for the base color on these leaves, we did a little bit of very light, cool yellow applied as a wash. Now I'm going directly in with watercolor marker. This is leaf green. And I'm going to blend it out with some increasingly not so clean water. So that it looks like the light's kind of hitting the edges of the leaf. Then I'm going to go in with our dark phthalo green. And start adding in some shadows. Blend that out a bit with our leaf green again. And I can also always go back in after this has had a chance to dry and tighten up some details. And then finally go in with our really chewed up looking indigo. Still puts down color just fine. And then blend that back out with our dark phthalo green. And I'm not applying too much pressure as I'm rendering, just because the paper is kind of vulnerable when it's wet like this, and it's really prone to getting kind of chewed up and frayed. Maybe I can rest my hand on the flower if I'm just really careful. And I think when I'm done with the leaves, I'll go get myself a fresh cup of water. I'm just working kind of loose and sloppy today.
You've got line art.
Yeah, I wasn't putting myself down. It's just, sometimes I work really tight, but honestly, I find that on these streams, if I work tight, then the stream takes 5 hours. It's a different stream. So I've been working on just kind of trying to work a little looser, work a little lighter, not stress out so much. You know, keep it chill stream. speaking of chill stream on Monday around 4, and I say around 4 because my mom and I have clocks that read completely different times despite both of them connecting to the internet, so who knows. But around 4 we're gonna do another chill stream, and this time we're playing around with one of those loom kits, and it's a loom kit she's had sitting around forever, so time to finally use it. And Joseph recently ordered a different webcam. It's like a Aukey version of the same one I'm using for this. What was your plan for that other webcam?
I don't know. You just talked about
Always want more cameras.
decent webcam or another decent webcam.
Yeah.
And no one seems to make a 4K webcam, so I figured no one will ever make a 4K webcam. So
There just might not be any use for a 4K webcam because you have smartphones that function as webcams.
Well, they don't hook up to an actual computer though.
I mean, there might be a way you could do that.
I've looked into it.
Oh, okay. Well, that works. I can't wait for that to come because I can set that one up in the living room. The dining room, sorry.
Aren't you using water-based markers, or are these alcohol?
These are water-based markers. Why?
Allie asked about it.
Yep, they are water-based markers. I'm blending out with water. Although the paper doesn't appreciate me so much tonight. It is good to have a spare. Plus, the webcam I use for these streams is plugged in the back of the computer, and it's a lot of effort to get it unplugged. All right, one more little leaf to go, and then I gotta paint the background leaves. Should have clipped it. I will clip it after I do the background leaves though. So something, it's both good and bad, is when I'm doing art supply stuff, it actually kind of has the ASMR effect. So it like really chills me out and I get like really low key and kind of calm, which is great, right? Except when you're doing a stream and you're supposed to be talking and entertaining people and you're just kind of like zoning out and coloring. Just sing instead. Oh yes, everyone wants to hear me sing. Let me tell you. $6:48. Man, did not feel like I was spending 48 minutes on this.
Quickly, were you hoping to get it done?
Oh, I want to get it done before 8. I'm hungry. I'm still bitter about that like Northern Lights live stream. That seriously, the technique is so easy. It's 3 layers of watercolor. And yet it took 3 hours because it was so wet that night. Speaking of that leaf right there, I can't really do much with it until it has dried out a bit more. All right, so I shall move on to the background leaves. Something else is if it starts looking too tight or too mannered or too coloring book, like whatever you call it. I'll show you something that'll help with that in a minute. All right, so indigo on the plate. Nobody laughed. And I'm not too concerned about this looking like a photo of a poinsettia. I'm more concerned about just kind of having fun, relaxing and painting and making something that I think looks nice. Also going to put down some of that dark phthalo green. Now if we were working on cotton rag, this would still be wet and we'd get like nice wet into wet kind of mottled blends. But not only do I have the dehumidifier on, but the heater's on in here and it's fairly cold outside. So the relative humidity, despite being in Louisiana, is probably pretty low. So the nice wet into wet mix is probably not going to happen. You'd have to work really fast for that. However, it's a cheap paper, makes for a good watercolor sketchbook, so I'm not complaining too much. Hey Kelly, good evening. So at this point, I'm kind of working in segments, trying to capture some of that wet into wet magic. At least you brought your phone with you, Hema, for help. let's give that a chance to dry. I'm gonna clean off my plate. I think that's a different meaning or a different application than the Clean Plate Club was looking for. I believe in you. You've got this. And I'm going to go switch my cup of water out for a clean cup. So I'll be right back. Oh, sorry. So by the time this is finished, it's going to be a bright red poinsettia flower. So in the center, I'm going to go back in with cadmium yellow. Still waiting on the background to dry. And then I'm going to rack it. Add some water. Yeah, marketing is hard. So Calvin said that they hate doing marketing because it feels like they're begging. And I know that is a very, very, very common sentiment when it comes to marketing your own stuff. But the thing is, if you make things and you're not willing to market it, then no one's ever going to buy it. If you're not willing to talk about it, if you're not willing to mention that it's for sale, if you're not willing to talk about some of the costs that go into making it, or even the value that it provides to other people, it's just never going to move. For a really long time, I used to feel like if my work was actually good enough, just in general, then I shouldn't have to tell people it's good enough. They should be able to see that for themselves. But I've also seen a lot of artists who I really admire and look up to just kind of languish in obscurity because they feel the same way, and they don't promote their own work and they don't talk about their own work, and they kind of feel like if it's going to become more popular, if it's going to find a fan base, then it's going to be because people will talk about it. Unfortunately, on the internet, that's not such a thing anymore. Most people don't necessarily tell other people or spend a lot of time talking about all the things they like. They spend a lot more time talking about all the things they don't like. So it's even more important for you to be your own cheerleader. The purple is for undertones, yes. So we'll get there. We'll get red with there with red, something like that. I don't really like marketing either. I don't necessarily feel like I'm begging. It's just I feel like I don't. And I feel like when I'm doing marketing, I run out of things to say very quickly. And it's not that I quit caring about the work that I'm promoting. It's just that I've run out of things to say. I'd rather make things than promote the things I've made. But it's kind of like having a kid. You know, if you're gonna have a kid, you got to nurture that child so that they can grow. So while I don't like marketing, or I don't like doing it myself, I think it's a really essential part of artist life, and it's something I want to become better at because I know I'm not a particularly effective marketer now. And another thing I think about is like other artists who I follow. When they're marketing their art, whether they're talking about commissions or books that they're selling, or they're promoting a Kickstarter, or they've got a new YouTube channel, like whatever, I don't ever look down on other artists for having to market their work. So I don't know why I look down on myself for having to market my work. So I am applying dark phthalo blue to those background leaves. I'm also blending it out a little bit. Of course, honestly, the best word of mouth of all, or rather, I already gave away the lead. The best marketing of all is positive word of mouth. People who enjoy your work and are willing to vouch for it. People who are inspired by your work and are brave enough to admit that, oh, hey, they were inspired by someone else. They didn't invent every idea ever. That is some of the best marketing, because people are way more likely to check out something if someone they trust has vouched for it. And while theoretically you can pay for that kind of marketing, people kind of see through that pretty quickly. So unfortunately, it just has to come organically. So if you like somebody's work, if they do a good job and you admire them, the best thing you can do, besides like supporting them financially, which I know, most of us can't really afford to do that too much, is to just tell other people about their work and how much you enjoy it and why you enjoy it. And I mean, I think sometimes people think their favorite creators, their favorite artists, their favorite YouTubers, like, know they enjoy their stuff. But I mean, people aren't mind readers. People are not going to know unless you tell them and talk to them about it. Or tag them so they can see it. I want to finish this background so I can use a clip so I can hold it tight. But I need a clip to finish this background. Oh, thank you so much, Kelly. That really means a lot to me. I work very hard to try and make tutorials and reviews that'll help other artists. And I get very depressed sometimes because I often feel like the work I'm doing doesn't really do anything. Doesn't help anyone, no one cares. So I really appreciate you telling me that. So I'm going to go back in with our dark phthalo green, and not only am I coloring in some areas, and you can see where it's still wet, you're not going to get a lot of color. Well, I think when you're a younger artist, staying in the line can be good, but it's not a rule. I mean, if your teacher is grading for staying in the line, that's one thing. But as you get older, sometimes leaving those lines and working a little bit rougher really gives you the end result you're looking for, because leaving the lines can convey a lot of things to the audience. Trying to keep my arm out of that wet area. The thing, so I am both an artist and an art teacher, and the thing I try to keep in mind when I'm teaching is so much of what is taught in schools to younger artists, it's good advice for the time being, but it's not the end all be all. It's not the only way to do things or the only way to think about things. And I often find that a lot of those don't ever color outside the lines kind of advice, it ends up being bad advice later on, you know, because it stifles their creativity, or it makes people afraid to take risks, or it makes people afraid to try new things or whatever. So when I'm teaching art, I have to really kind of carefully try to weigh between giving good general advice and giving advice that might accidentally stifle their artistic ability or stifle their desire to grow. So like, for example, when I was younger and I was taking art classes in you know, grade school, our teachers really didn't want us to draw with like an anime style or a cartoony style, and they said things like, oh, you're never going to get anywhere with that, which was a lie. Like, just flat out was a lie, because they didn't know. Because most of them, their profession was teaching art, not making and selling art or selling illustration or anything like that. So like, they didn't know, but they were giving, I guess, what they thought was the best advice possible, but it was really career hindering advice. I mean, I did what I wanted anyway. I just didn't turn it in for class. I would do it in my own time. So, you know, I don't want to tell you like, oh, don't listen to your teacher. But I also want to say it's okay to color outside the lines, and it's okay to take risks, and it's okay to try new things, and it's okay to mix different materials and to figure things out on your own. And if you like how it looks, that's great. And if you don't like how it looks, then don't do it anymore. Because the thing about art is that it is subjective. Everyone who looks at it is going to have a different opinion and different feelings about it. And sometimes you're just making art because you want to make art, you want to do something, and you're not necessarily doing it to impress other people. You're just doing it to make yourself happy, and that's a valid and legitimate reason to make art. And sometimes you're making art to sell, and you're making pieces that you don't really like, but your audience likes it, and that, you got to pay them bills. Okay, I'm gonna have to give this a chance to dry because it's so wet. You know, if you sometimes can't stay in the line, even if you're really trying, that's okay. Real life isn't lived inside the lines. People have to make messy decisions. They have to make compromises and choices that they didn't necessarily want to make, even if they're trying their best sometimes. So it's okay if you can't stay in the line. And I wish your teacher would teach you instead how to fix those mistakes instead of just telling you to stay in the line. I wish your teacher would show you some things you could do to make the art look good even if you went outside the lines. How to make it work for you. To me, that is a more valuable lesson than just telling you to stay in the lines. So on this note, I don't super love this poinsettia, but that's okay. It's still a work in progress. Maybe we are in the ugly phase. We got to let it dry and then look at it and make a decision from there. Oh, but it gives me a chance to kind of get caught up on the chat. You know, I understand that. Kelly says, I love to make happy and people happy. I love to make people be, Wow, sorry I cannot read. I love to make people happy and be happy. Yeah, I understand that. That's one of the reasons I make art as well, is I like to make other people happy, and I find art and illustration to be just really rewarding and really fulfilling, so it makes me happy too. I like really get into the zone, and it just always puts me in better spirits. Kelly says, I have a coloring book and I don't want to stay in the lines that much, so I don't know if that's good or bad. If you don't want to stay in the line, then don't stay in the line. Color however you want. It's your coloring book. So the thing is, when people give that kind of advice, and it is true for me also, they are just giving advice based on their experiences. They don't live your life, they are not making your choices for you, and they're not going to be responsible for whatever choices, good or bad, you make. So that's why I kind of like, I try to think about what their intentions are when people give me unsolicited advice or even solicited advice. And I try to think, like, is this someone who cares about me and wants to see me succeed? Is this someone who is getting paid to care about me and they don't really care at all? Is this somebody who doesn't care at all and would benefit from me failing? Or is this someone who doesn't like me and would like to see me fail? And then I kind of make my decision for what I'm going to do with their advice based on those things. Hey, Zargo Hunter, it's been a while. And Calvin's right, yeah, city scenes, you can definitely work a lot looser. You don't have to stay within the lines. You can kind of just go with what you think looks good, and you can add stuff in, and people are not necessarily going to notice the addition or the omission. I'm sorry, I'm looking for my spray bottle of water, and I think it rolled off my desk. So I don't know where it is. So what I was going to do was I was going to spray some water and really get things moving. I guess I'll look for it. It's gonna bother me if I don't, so I'm adventuring under the desk. Ooh, there's so many eraser shavings down here. Even though I sweep often, I have secured the water. I hate climbing under there. All right, we have our water. Let's get a little bit of motion going. So how have you been, Zargo Hunter? It's been a while. I know you were working on your own YouTube channel for a while. I saw you talking about it on Instagram. That was quite a bit ago though, so I might be just totally out of the loop. So what I'm doing is I'm just spritzing it with some water, and what that's gonna do is it's really gonna, hopefully, fingers crossed, it's gonna make the paint move around some and just kind of loosen things up a bit, because that line art was so loose to begin with. Talking about coloring outside the lines and doing what you want. Of course, that is also going to make everything take longer to dry. Hey, DJ Crumart, it's been a while. Drawing things like buildings and furniture because there's too much precision and straight lines involved. All right, so waiting on that to dry. So what I'm going to do is I want a really bright red poinsettia. So I have a few different reds. Let me see what will get me what I want. So I think for the main leaves, I'm going to use Scarlet Red, Pale Geranium Lake, and Pink Carmine. So Zargo says, I got the channel still, but haven't had anything I have finished for upload for a couple of months. Yeah, that's the thing about art channels, especially when you're doing finished art, is it can take a really, really long time to have. That's like my big bummer with my channel, is that the turnaround time for things is sometimes very, very slow. And I'm working as fast as I can, but you know, there's other things going on. And Calvin pointed out that I waited for it to dry only to re-wet it. Yeah, you know, I was kind of inspired by all the talk about going outside the lines and just kind of doing your own thing, that I decided I was going to wet it down again to get some color movement. So that's that impulsivity, that ADHD impulsivity. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I mean, that's what watercolor sketchbooks are for, is for us to play and do things and take risks, and maybe it'll fail and maybe it'll succeed, who knows? Otherwise it gets boring. But on that note, so it really kind of moved everything around, which is good and bad. It did make some things more muddy, which is not my favorite, but that's all right. And it definitely got rid of some of our yellow veins on the leaves, which is kind of disappointing. You roll the dice and sometimes you lose. That's okay. So I'm going to hold it down and just try to dab up some of that on the veins. Now, if I'd been smart, I could have used either masking fluid or wax to just kind of create a resist so that we don't lose all that. Yep, watercolor does allow randomness. Oh, nice! Congratulations, Zargo. I get that. We just moved from one state to another, so a lot of stuff has been kind of up in the air. All right, so I'm going to apply a wash of our Scarlet Red. And I'm just doing that so that I'll end up with some lighter areas of color and some darker areas of color. Just trying not to get it too much in the blue, but that's all right. I like how the red looks over the yellow. I love that orange. Oh my gosh, congratulations. Happy birthday, Kelly. You and Tali both have a birthday next week. Wait, yes, the 10th is technically next week. Had to think about that. 11's a big deal. Are you guys doing anything fun for your birthdays? Do I have all the Winsor Newton and Faber-Castell watercolor markers, or just a lot of both? I have just a lot of both. I mean, when you're buying them yourself, you can't have all of them, right? I mean, I guess you could, but that would get very, very cost prohibitive. I'm waiting on this to dry. Let's go back in and make a mess. And also, white gouache forgives a lot of sins. Your return.
Yep. I'm gonna order 5.
Popeyes. Good, because I am very hungry. Okay, so in the center of our poinsettia, I'm going to go in with cadmium yellow. It ought to just say the name all over it so I don't have to constantly be turning. ABT, always be turning. And then I'm going to go in with, I think this is leaf green. You'd think I'd remember by now. They look like little corns. Have I ever used one up? I don't use them as often as I use pan watercolors now. So no, I've never used one up, but I also don't necessarily use them all that often either. I like them. They're fun to have. They're fun for like unusual projects, kind of like this. They work a little bit faster than say traditional watercolor, you know, because if I'm applying like a really thick application, I'm just applying it directly to the paper rather than, you know, mixing it and then waiting for water to evaporate. I think it probably depends, like they're so different from half pans and their application is so different that I do kind of feel like it's a bit like comparing apples to oranges. Like someone who is going to enjoy watercolor markers like this is probably going to be using them differently than someone who's using like tube watercolors or half pan watercolors. But that's just my opinion. I mean, also how I use them is much less nuanced than how I use half pan watercolors or tube watercolors. So it's just such a different type of art for me. I have a really old tutorial where I show how to use them the way I would use half pan and tube watercolors, like to get more subtle watercolor effects and less like graphic marker effects. And someone got on me because they were disappointed that I wasn't using them directly like this. And you know, I saw their point. mean, I also don't use watercolor pencils the way I would use pan and half pan watercolors, so it really might depend on the individual artist. Like, I actually do use watercolor pencils pretty frequently, especially on comic pages, but it's really more for adding in like tight, more defined details. So even if they get regular use, I'm not using them a lot on every illustration, so they last. I've never had to replace any well, no, that's not true. I have replaced my white Derwent Inktense pencil a couple times, but that one really sees a lot of use. I guess if one wanted to do a test, what I would do is mass tone of both. A mass tone mix with a watercolor wash, and then a mass tone mix with the markers, and see which one runs out first. It wouldn't surprise me if it was the marker. I'm just making mud at this point, just making mud at this point. Thought about using the markers for details. You said it as I typed. Yep, they work well for that, or for more graphic things, if that makes sense, because you can kind of get in there maybe a little bit easier than you might with watercolor, and they don't require as much water to use unless you want to. I mean, they're not my preferred medium. I don't have like a bunch of videos on the channel where I'm using watercolor markers. It's a lot of videos of me using alcohol markers and watercolor. But I think they can be fun, and I think they do offer something different and unique. And for someone like me who usually kind of thinks in more muted tones or pastels, they're a good way to like force me to work with brighter colors. And spend too much time rendering leaves. This is a real long roundabout way of getting to this point with the leaves. I ended up just kind of playing around with them. But y'all inspired me to do that. I kind of like how the leaves are coming out now though, so. Vimus, good evening. Or Vimris, sorry. Oh. They handle very differently from alcohol markers. I think this is for somebody who wants to blend out like watercolor, but wants the immediacy of a marker. And yeah, light fastness is a concern for them because these are going to be much more light fast than, say, the Ecoline watercolor markers or the Canon watercolor markers, both of which are dye based. I mean, I like using my watercolors in tubes, so I'll buy, not tubes, sorry, half pans. So I'll buy tube watercolors and then put them into half pans and let them dry. I have a cat though, so like having open tube watercolors, you know what I mean? Like just dry on a palette like a lot of people do is a luxury. That is not my life. Yeah. Capturing a good likeness for leaves and petals is a challenge. Because you want detail, but you don't want so much detail, and then it's just a lot of back and forth. Sorry. I'm dual recording. So I was fiddling with my secondary camera. It is also struggling to capture a good color likeness. These are watercolor markers. It's not a dumb question at all. That's a very good question. So water-based markers are, they can refer to these. These do use water as a solvent. It can also refer to stuff like Crayola, or it can refer to dye-based markers like the Canon markers or the Ecoline watercolor markers. These are pigment-based watercolor markers, which is kind of unusual. These use India ink, these use watercolor pigments, because usually watercolor markers utilize dye rather than actual pigments. And dye is very water reactive. It's also very light fugitive. Not a dumb question at all. Yep, that's my problem too. I can't use tube watercolor directly either, except for gouache. I will use white gouache to add highlights pretty much directly, but I'm not mixing it with anything, and I'm just applying it directly to the substrate, so it's not really... So it's quite a bit more graphic than I normally work, but that's good for me. Good to break out of the comfort zone and try something different. So I'm doing a bunch of different Christmas themed tutorials this year, and I'm trying to use different materials for most of them. Partially it's just a way to get me to play around with something that isn't just straight up watercolor or alcohol markers, but also because I thought it'd be fun. I mean, look how mushed that is. I don't know why that looks like that. I don't treat my markers like that. You can't get any fine details with that one anymore. Okay, that's good enough. So now I'm going into our poinsettia leaves, the red ones, because those are still leaves. Those are not actually petals. And I'm using scarlet red, and it is definitely picking up some of that blue. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do two things. I'm trying to keep my hand off of the art so I'm not smearing it all over the place. And normally what I would do is I would use a sheet of just printer paper, like a blotter, just to kind of be a layer of protection between my hand and the illustration. In this instance, I don't want to cover up what I'm doing too much, so I'm just trying to kind of like hover my hand above it, and I'm trying to leave some of our base color visible. I don't want Domino's. Sorry. Talking about dinner. I don't want to eat here either. We don't have anything prepared. I'm hungry yesterday.
I've been trying for 15 minutes.
Oh man, Popeyes, come on. How am I?
That happened at your mom's house when we were trying to order.
Yeah, they need to fix their site. Oh, you know what? I have a really, really good blog post on my blog about pigments and dyes. Let me grab that for you. You can get really, really granular with it too. These are indeed the Faber-Castell watercolor markers. So these use India ink pigments rather than, say, you know, stones and lake dyes, etc. So these are going to be some of the most light fast of all. Actually, what I wanted to try to do, excuse me for talking dinner talk, but I wanted to order from like Trewa. I haven't had Trewa in a while, and I think they're only open for pickup and for order. Yeah, they're the one in Destrehan. You were talking about Hong Kong the other day, but Trewa used to be really pretty legit. I mean, the thing about going back to like pigments and dyes just kind of seeping into the fibers, on a cellulose paper like this, it almost doesn't matter because both of them are just going to kind of sit on the surface. And that's because cellulose paper tends to, like cotton rag paper tends to be more woven, even if it's more pressed. It's more like a matte-like texture, so particles can kind of settle into the fibers and either stain it or color it, whereas with a cellulose paper like this, everything is so tightly packed, and then the texture on the surface is just embossed on, usually using like a heat roller, that nothing really seeps in. So that's why cellulose papers are a lot more likely to cause muddiness or to develop muddiness. It's because you just can't work them the way you could work a cotton rag paper. Now, I am kind of curious about whatever binder watercolor markers are using, especially these pigment-based ones, because I've had these for a while. I do store them horizontally, but I don't use them all that frequently. So you would think the water, if it was just water, would evaporate, but I'm thinking it's like water and glycerin. Cellulose paper is the cheaper student grade paper, so you probably have used cellulose paper. So basically, if a watercolor paper doesn't, at least in the US, if it doesn't list what it's made of, it's probably cellulose. Cellulose being wood pulp. So, you know, most papers are made of wood pulp. Whereas cotton rag will disclose that it's made of cotton rag and then what percentage. I don't like using mixed fiber papers myself. Like I don't like 25% cotton rag, because I find that those basically have the worst properties of both fibers rather than the best properties of both fibers. So right now I'm working in a Canson XL watercolor sketchbook, cheap cellulose paper. It's one of the cheaper watercolor sketchbooks, and you can find these all over the place, at least here in the US. And I make that distinction because I've been to a couple of other countries where art supplies were much cheaper and they had better labeling and the staff seemed to be more knowledgeable about what they're selling. So it's one of those your mileage may vary situations. Okay, so that is our base layer with the scarlet red. Sometimes gelatin. Not trying to get as much movement, but it's just got such a marker look that I want to get a little bit of movement going. Oh, Tally, that sounds like a nice birthday. Collage for some printing plates. Are you using like the jelly plates? Or are you gonna do like cut rubber, or are you doing linoleum? Glue could be anything. I mean, you've got this, which is an animal hide glue. They could be using that. Or they could be using, like a typical glue that's usually made of like horse hooves. Hence the old glue factory jokes. And there's even plant-based glues too. Let's see, I swear there are paper making videos on YouTube from like Canson where they kind of talk about it. And then I bet paper making books would also discuss your options for, for sizing. Although that's not going to tell you what a specific company is using. But it'll help you kind of deduce. Sorry, I'm waiting on paint to dry anyway, so I might as well look it up. Now, you guys can, I'll watch these later, but I actually have my volume turned off, so I couldn't tell you whether they talk about it too much or not. But that's just a search for watercolor manufacturing. Yes, I'm gonna watch those later on. I guess while I wait for that to dry, I'll try to hover and just put in a little bit of dark chrome yellow. They're not stupid questions, but they are questions that require a fair amount of thought. And I've actually talked about some of them on my blog. And if you caught me when I was fresher, I might be able to explain it a little bit better. So basically, like I said, cellulose paper is made from wood pulp, whereas cotton rag paper is made from cotton fibers. Sizing is added either on the exterior, on the surface of the paper to give it structure, or it's part of the paper making process to give it internal structure. So that's why you'll get some papers that are basically like painting on wet toilet paper, and you'll get some papers that are painting on cardboard. So it kind of just depends on what your preferences are and what kind of painting you're doing. So a while back, Winsor & Newton's first attempt at their watercolor paper had a lot of complaints because they had a lot of surface sizing, that's sizing on the exterior of the paper, and it basically gave it the consistency like painting on soap. I actually really liked that paper because I found that the colors were really vibrant, but a lot of people didn't like that paper, so they ended up pulling it and reformulating. Like I said, it's going to be about your personal preference. You want sizing to an extent because it's going to give your paper structure, it's going to give it rigidity. It may also help it, like if you really saturate your paper, it's going to help keep it from turning just to pulp. And it also means, theoretically, with a good cotton rag paper, if you don't like your watercolor paper, you can literally take it to a sink or a tub and like scrub out the paint. Having a lot of sizing is going to help with that. It's going to keep it from basically turning back into paper pulp. So some people think if you stretch your watercolor paper, like if you add water to your watercolor paper, it's going to dissolve the sizing and it's going to turn to pulp. That is only true if you're using hot water, because gelatin is only going to dissolve in hot water. It's not going to dissolve in cold water. So if you're working with and in cold water, you shouldn't have problems with your sizing just completely melting away. Yeah, a lot of sizing will make the paper less absorbent, which I think they often will do that with cheaper papers to make them seem like they're a heavier weight. Otherwise, I can't really understand why you would want too much surface sizing. Okay. Just gonna use a couple of little clips now that we've got the background painted, just to hold it down so it stops buckling all over the place. You're welcome. I have a lot of like nitty-gritty watercolor explanation from like your brushes and your paints to your papers over at natosoup.blogspot.com. And those posts took a lot of time to write, so I would really appreciate it if people read them. I can understand that, using a lot of surface sizing when using a dye-based watercolor, because it's going to change the handling properties of a dye-based watercolor and it may make it easier to use. Ah, okay. I understand that. Oh, so tired of waiting for paint to dry. So next, I'm going in with Pale Geranium Lake. I'm still using the hover technique. See, you guys can't really see it, but I've overworked this paper. You probably can guess. I've overworked this paper, and I'm getting some pilling, and I'm getting some pilling mostly right now. If this paper had more sizing, then all the scrubbing I'm doing with these brushes, as gentle as I'm trying to be, because I am actually, believe it or not trying to overwork this paper, but if it had more sizing, it would basically glide on the paper surface a little bit better, and it wouldn't be as prone to fraying. That is not as noticeable as I thought it would be. Do you know what that weird noise is, Joseph?
No.
This is going to sound super stupid because I know better, but
Like a bird.
I was going to say it sounds like people cheering, and there is no way that's the Destrehan game, because we're further away than that. See, friends, instead of hanging out with y'all tonight, I could have been at a football game during COVID-19. So I'm leaving a little bit of a white or a lighter color halo on the veins, like the light is catching them. Do you mean the Canson Lacrel Heritage, or are you referring to a paper that maybe we're not getting in the US that I would not have had a chance to try? I mean, me personally, I don't like using watercolor markers. You know what? That I have not tried them on a hot press paper. I might really like them on a hot press paper. That's something to keep in mind for another day. See, I think cellulose papers have their place. I like how fast they dry when you live in a place as humid as Louisiana. That can be very helpful. I like how economical they are. I mean, keep in mind, I have a watercolor comic, so I have hundreds of painted comic pages. And when you're funding it yourself, you got to find ways to make it work. And I happen to really like Canson's Montball for that. It behaves almost like a cotton rag paper. It is one of the best behaved cellulose papers I've encountered. Maybe it's how I'm handling it, or maybe it's based on my preference. I don't know. And I've reviewed a few different cotton rag papers here on the channel, although by no means all. I mean, there's so many, and it is kind of cost prohibitive at 20 bucks a block to buy and review all of them. So I kind of buy them as I need them. All right, so that is our pale geranium lake. Yeah, go ahead, put a link in. It is a student grade paper. Maybe that's a different name for like Montball then. And then finally, I'm going in with pink carmine. Now we're actually getting some color difference. Unfortunately, this camera really kind of bleeds all the color out. So I don't know how accurate this is. Wrong side. I mean, one of the nice things about watercolor markers like these is you can get some really immediate color blending just using like the brush, and very saturated color blending too. It's different from Montball. It is very stiff. You know, I bet we don't have it. There are a lot of art supplies that we in the US just don't get because they'd rather sell us children's stuff and mark it up like it's for adults. And then when adults buy it and wonder why they hate it and wonder why they're bad at art, the artists just blame themselves. There's a saying, I don't know how universal it is. The saying is that it is a poor artist who blames their tools. Well, I say it's a poor art supply company that markets something that was originally intended for children to adults so that they can charge more, and then don't disclose that it's really a children's grade material.
We got 8 minutes.
Well, I may run a little long, which sucks because it means you get to eat delicious fried chicken and I have to smell it. I don't get to eat it until after. But I am committed to finishing. So one thing I like to do, which you guys see that I kind of did in the background, but I also got kind of sloppy, is I like having like really rough backgrounds and then more rendered or tighter foregrounds. And this did not turn out at all like I had envisioned in my mind meets. I originally thought of this as kind of a companion piece to that water lily watercolor marker tutorial I did a while back. And this one just kind of developed a mind of its own, which isn't the worst. But it's very different from what I envisioned. Would resist work? Yep. Resist would have worked. I should have done resist. I did not. I kind of just let the spirit take me. And I did not necessarily plan which is fine. That makes this really more of like a watercolor sketch than something that I would call like a watercolor illustration, in my opinion, like based on my work. It's a lot looser and a lot more scribbly, but that's okay. I don't normally give myself a lot of permission to play too much. So, play is good. Play is how we learn. I do have a soft spot for like Crayola and stuff. My real big beef is a lot of these companies will hire professional artists, which is legit, to make these subpar materials look better than they actually are. So they're basically paying artists to use their years and years of experience to make something that isn't very good look like it's a premium product, so that they can sell it for more than it's really worth. And then people see how easily, in heavy quotes, these professional artists can use these materials, you know, basically using their years and years and years of experience to kind of make the thing work a little bit better. And they think, oh, I'll be able to do XYZ. I'm just learning how to watercolor. I'm just learning how to draw. If so-and-so likes it, I should be good at it too. And my complaint is they don't disclose that the things are actually really student grade. Like Faber-Castell is doing that with the Gold Faber line here in the US. At certain stores like Michael's, they're being sold like they are the premium line, and they're definitely charging a premium price for it. And it's Michael's, I know. But Michael's is also one of the more accessible art and craft stores here in the US. Most people have a Michael's in their area. So it bothers me just because it bums me out to see people get really discouraged and then give up on it. I mean, I think there is validity in making art even if you're not good at it. Oh, I'm so sorry. So I'm going to let this dry. I kind of want to add in some red violet and get a little bit more shading going on. We'll see how that works, if that works. It might work. And then I want to let it dry and do a little bit of white gouache just here and there, especially to clean up some of those leaves. Now, one of the problems I have with using watercolor markers is I think a lot of them use glycerin as the binder, like I mentioned earlier. And glycerin makes it very difficult if you wanted to use, say, watercolor markers on top of it. It basically creates kind of a resist. So what I would do is I would do watercolor pencil highlights in white. I think would look really nice and would add just a little bit of like reflection that I think we've kind of lost. But because these have so much glycerin in them, that's not going to happen. So the intention is there. That's also true of like cheap watercolors. Cheap watercolors tend to use glycerin. So they tend to form like a waxy, soapy resist on the paper surface, and they're going to be more prone to lifting. So on that note, like Cotman watercolors, right, definitely fall into that category, are definitely student grade, are sometimes sold in the US by different retailers as though they are professional grade. And on that note, the Winsor & Newton watercolor pencils are made using Cotman quality pigment. So I would not call them professional grade watercolor pencils. I would call them student grade. But I think they are like pretty much almost exclusive to Michael's. So it's kind of a... They seem to mostly sell student grade stuff at a professional grade markup anyway. It definitely looks kind of like coloring book type to me. Out comes the water. Get some movement going. A little bit of chaos. Yeah, we definitely need something lower than student. That's why I refer to things as hobby grade or children's grade. I'm trying to make that further delineation. Unfortunately, the atrocious stuff often does sell because it gets sent to YouTubers who are then told they can't say anything negative about it or they'll lose their sponsorship. So full disclosure, on occasion, an art supply company like Artnerds, and they're not really an art supply company, they just sell rebranded Chinese art supplies, will contact me and ask me to do a review. I always tell them I will only do honest reviews, so if I don't like it, I don't like it, and you can deal with it, and I don't take any money in return. I only get the product. So even though on occasion I will, and I mean like I can count it on one hand, on occasion I will review art supplies that were sent to me by a company. They don't ever pay me money to do it. The bigger art YouTubers are getting paid to do it. Legally in the US we are required to disclose that. Not everybody does, but it's those kind of things that lead to atrocious art supplies continuing to be sold. And you know, there will always be someone who loves and can use and can make beautiful art with a real POS art supply. I know someone who can use Crayola washable watercolors, which are terrible, and can paint some really great stuff with. They're the only person I know of who can do that, but they can do it. My local store sells Van Gogh watercolors as professional watercolors. And see, they have a professional line above that, the Rembrandts. I tend to look at one-star reviews first. I like to know just what might be wrong with a product. Yeah, same here. I use, oh, gee, what is it called? They have a browser extension for it. FakeSpot. I use FakeSpot to help me, especially when I'm buying stuff that might be rebranded Chinese stuff like Ohuhu or Artex. I use them to spot fake reviews. I didn't get as much movement as I wanted, and I'm still waiting for it to dry. And Popeyes is here. Popeyes is if you don't know, a fried chicken chain in Louisiana. And I want my Popeyes. So anyway, what I'm going to do after this dries is I'm going to apply some white gouache as highlights here and there, but this has to dry first. So while I wait for that to happen, I'll go ahead and pick up the Mac's. Oh yeah, there's people who can use terrible stuff to make wonderful things. It doesn't make it a wonderful product. It just means they're really good at kind of coaxing the best out of something awful. I mean, there's ways you can use Crayola super tips like watercolor markers and make some really nice art with it. And that's fine, but don't charge premium art supply prices just because somebody can do that. Or don't assume that an art supply is a good art supply just because somebody can do that. I don't know. Sorry. I mean, I am familiar with I Am What I Am, but I don't know if they're related at all. I want to say I don't think so, but I don't know. when we do these live streams and y'all mention other channels, it always kind of makes me wonder if y'all are mentioning my channel in their live streams too. I hope so. The mines were scattered in most of the ones I used. What does that mean? One of the most disliked. I always appreciate it when you guys share my channel with other people. I don't want to sound like a big old whiny butt, but you know, it does get discouraging because I've been doing this for quite a while and I have my own cheap art supply reviews and tutorials that I do here on this channel, and it does kind of get a little discouraging sometimes to not necessarily see the growth that I'd like to see. And to see other people who started after I did have explosive growth doing some of the same kind of content. So it really means a lot to me when you guys do actually share the stuff I make with other people and help spread the word, because like I mentioned earlier when we were talking about marketing, the best marketing you can ever have is positive word of mouth. Somebody who enjoys your work and shares it with other people. Ooh, good luck with the 4 a.m. shift, Tanner. I'm just waiting literally for paint to dry so that I can then apply white gouache. And since I should practice what I preach, I know the Frugal Crafter has a really good video on painting poinsettias that went live recently. I was watching her and the Art Sherpa upload all these Christmas videos in November and being like, oh, too soon for Christmas. But if you're looking for a more realistic poinsettia tutorial, I highly recommend hers. I think you guys will really enjoy it. Yes, I know I could use a hairdryer, but you see I just moved and it is in a box all the way in the back of the closet that we are not unboxing until we buy our forever home and move there. So I do have a hairdryer, but it is boxed up and I am not going spelunking today. You can do all of your Tokyo Drift moves driving pre-dawn. Also, frankly, like using a hairdryer is a hit or miss proposition. I've had to do funky things to colors and funky things to pigments and funky things to papers. So while it is sometimes a necessary evil when you're doing watercolor on a stream, it is not something I ever use when I'm doing watercolor not on a stream. All right, this is still wet, but that's okay. My Popeyes has arrived, and I am just not that married to this piece. So, you know what? I do some splatter. I'm going to do some splatter, and I'm going to enjoy it because I've already made a mess. Might as well make a full mess. Ought to use a synthetic for this, but, you know, you only live once. And I can already feel my soul leaving my body because this has taken longer. Always takes longer than I expect. That's painting in Louisiana for you. We had the heater on full blast too. Yes, this is a between homes home. So this is not my forever studio. This is a studio. I'm not even allowed to put stuff on the walls because the woman who's renting this place does not want me to. And she came in to look at something and she was mad that I took some of her paintings off the walls to protect them. So, you know. Oh, you know, I'd like to say I would unpack stuff when we move, but let's be real. I would so when we moved here, when we were leaving Nashville, I got rid of and donated so many art supplies, and I'd like to continue that trend and rehome some stuff. I'm so close to done. I know the Popeyes is here.
Yeah.
The delicious fried chicken. Do you happen to know? I know Popeye the Sailor Man used to be their mascot. Like when I was a kid. I don't see him as their mascot anymore, but I don't know if it's just because he's kind of...
Their mascot is chicken.
It's a chicken, I know. But I don't know if he like is ever used on their branding anymore.
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it ever, like as a kid, or you
I
just
don't
haven't seen it
remember.
recently? I will say this earlier time slot, I know it doesn't work for a lot of people, but it's working better for me because at least I'm more awake. Doing it at 8 o'clock at night, by the time we finish, I am exhausted. And I'm still going to be tired after this because I mean I was literally talking for 2 hours while painting, which is kind of a feat. But at least I'm not going to be like totally exhausted. And I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me this evening, whether you were able to hang out for just 30 minutes or you were able to hang out for the full stream, whatever. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you guys. I'm gonna live in the danger zone and freehand some poinsettia leaves in the background because you only live once. And if you're not having fun making art, it kind of quickly ceases to be a thing you make time to do anymore. Too bad I am not doing Christmas cards this year. Nope. I already have enough mailing ahead of me fulfilling 7-inch Kara's Kickstarter. But it is always my hope that somebody who normally would use just stamps, not that there's anything wrong with stamps, but would see this and think, oh, you know what, I could do that, and takes a risk and draws us something with their own 2 hands that might not turn out perfect, but is something that they did. I mean, stamps can be good and die cuts can be good and printables can be good, but I think taking an art risk and making something of your own that you designed and you drew and you painted is also good. Ugh, getting my hand in wet paint because I'm impatient. So impatient. Just wipe it off on my clothes because I'm a child. That's true, Calvin. Experimentation is great, and sometimes you can find your next favorite something just by like noodling around and experimenting. Plus, yeah, hanging out and talking shop always kind of gets me like all fired up to make things. think he is. Did you eat your chicken?
No.
I appreciate you waiting for me. That's sweet of you. I'm so close to being done, though, if you can't tell. And then I'm gonna put the delicious fried chicken in my face. I think that's one of the things that made living in Nashville, where I only had a couple of friends who were artsy, it made it really hard for me, is because I basically no longer had an art community that I belonged to and that I could contribute to other than online. So I felt really isolated, and I would get really burnt out, because before that, when I was in grad school, I had a bunch of friends and we'd all hang out and we'd make art together and we'd like experiment with each other's art supplies, stuff like that. And that was so much fun. And I basically just left all that behind. And here in Louisiana, I haven't really recuperated that yet. I hope to. Yeah, COVID makes it very dangerous here because not everyone takes any precautions at all, and some people think it's a hoax. So it's not really a good idea for me to do it here at this time. But it's one of my goals to kind of form a little art community again and have IRL people that I can make art with and share art supplies with sometimes. Towards the end of my stay in Nashville, I had a friend who we would exchange art supplies sometimes. And it took 6 years to make a friend like that. And it was great because I could review so many more things because I was basically working through her catalog of art supplies. I mean, when I formed this channel, I really wanted to have more collaborative stuff, more people come on and make art and hang out. And it's just kind of a bummer that it never really panned out that way, because the friends I had who did live in the area moved or were not necessarily comfortable being on camera, which I respect, I understand that. But I wanted this to be a space where we played. Yeah, that's right. So on Monday, I'm doing a chill stream at 4 p.m. It's just kind of an impromptu sort of thing. And the point of the chill streams is we either use a kit we bought a while back and never did anything with, or pick up a cheap art kit and kind of review it, and also, you know, make the time to try something new. Like last week, we did acrylic marble pouring, which is not something I would have ever done if it weren't for, you know, doing it with my mom. So this week we're going to be playing around with like one of those loom kits, which is also something I would not have done on my own, but I'm looking forward to it. All right. So our poinsettia, or as some folks say, poinsettia, is finally finished, finally done. So I really enjoyed hanging out with you guys this evening. I hope you guys had a good evening as well. And I hope I'll see you guys again soon. Just reading up on the chat. If you could ask the artist behind the die cuts and stamps, coloring books and whatnot, very few of them would say it is perfect. Oh, I'm not talking about those being perfect. I'm saying I think a lot of people who want to make art go for those sort of things because to them it is perfect, because when they draw things, all they can see is the flaws. Yeah, you ask any artist about their work and very few artists are going to ever say they think their work is perfect. They might look at it 6 months later and be like, you know what, it's got flaws, but I like it. But they're probably not going to say it's perfect. So no, I'm not assuming those artists think it's perfect, and I don't think they're perfect. But when I was teaching at Plaza, I would get students who were the card makers who were coming in because they wanted to learn how to use alcohol markers, and it was such a struggle to get them to draw their own things because they were so afraid of looking like a fool in front of the other students, when it's like No one's here for that. Don't worry about that. You draw what you want to draw, and if it's not perfect, I can help you, but I can't help you if you don't take any risks. So I think it's that kind of mindset, which is why I try to make tutorials that are often very accessible to try and help people. And that's also why in these live streams, when I make mistakes, I just roll with it and I don't sit there and I don't beat myself up and I don't start all over again necessarily, because I want to normalize that when you're making art, you're going to make things you don't always like, but it's still worthwhile. Or you're going to make mistakes, but if you power through, you may end up with something you like, or you may end up learning something. So no, I don't think those coloring books and die cuts are perfect by any shake. I'm not like dumping on them, but like, I don't think they're perfect. But I have taught people who would rather always have something that comes out consistently than take a risk. You should see some of the sunrises around here recently. Orange glow fading into purple and blue. Sunrises are a little bit early in the morning for me, but we do get some really gorgeous sunsets around here. Like the deep colors here. And unfortunately, this little webcam doesn't do such a great job of capturing them. So I'm gonna post pictures of this over on Instagram as well. All right, guys, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I hope you guys remain safe and healthy and able to enjoy your lives. If you wanna come hang out on Monday, that's gonna be around 4. And then next Friday, I have another Christmas themed stream. We might color ourselves a very cute gingerbread girl, or I may just record that and time lapse it for people who want to do that. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'm gonna go eat me some fried chicken. Bye, guys. Gotta turn off the YouTube because they changed how they do things. Gotta hit in the stream, in the stream. Yes, we wanna end the stream.